Hi, so I've been working my way through 2001: A Space Odyssey, the movie, the book, various sequels, etc. That's the plan, to go through every sort of iteration of 2001. So I've watched the precursor, I've read like precursor short stories by Arthur C. Clarke, watched the Stanley Kubrick movie, read Clarke's novel, and I'm going through in like the sequence they appeared. So the next thing, 8 years after the movie and book came out in 1968, this bad boy appeared, a gigantic comic published by Marvel, and the main creative mover in this is Jack Kirby as writer, editor and artist. So it's an adaptation of the film. Oddly, it's not coinciding exactly with the when the film came out. Apparently it was still being shown on campuses and in certain kinds of cinemas, so kind of makes sense. Yeah, so these Marvel Treasury editions, these oversized books, no ads, were sort of big, chunky, kind of expensive for the time, sort of premium comics. And interesting having Kirby doing it. So Jack Kirby, a kind of legendary comics creator, artist, writer. He's largely or wholly responsible for a whole bunch of characters: Captain America, the Fantastic Four, Thor, and he by this time had been working not for Marvel for a while, for DC, where again created loads of characters and concepts that were maybe critical successes, if not commercially, but are still being used today. Then he'd come back to Marvel, 1976, and this is one of his first assignments. So, like Stanley Kubrick, like Arthur C. Clarke, Kirby is both a major sort of creative force of the 20th century and an individual stylist who very much does his own thing. You know, if you wanted an adaptation that was kind of going to be sort of done in a very polite way that would keep everybody happy, you might as well have gone to Picasso or somebody as Jack Kirby, really, because what you get is Kirby, pure Kirby. And just as the film and the book have very different tone, style, and even some different content, same's true of this. So it's like the third leg of the stool. Now then, I want to look through it, but I don't want to stand here flapping the pages at you. So I'm going to fill the screen with visuals while I talk through some of the key elements you find in your Marvel Treasury 2001. Well, obviously we've got a cover which tells us it's an official adaptation. I think by this time Marvel had done their Wizard of Oz book, so they obviously had an in with MGM. Yes, it was 1976. And now the ultimate trip becomes the ultimate illustrated adventure. And then the back is all artwork, scintillating Kirby artwork. Turning to the inside cover, we see a big slate of creators with some nice futuristic computer writing. Introductory splash page, we get to see the Kirby's vision of the monolith. So straight away there's several big differences, as well as more of that fabulous computer writing. One being this energy flash bursting out of the monolith. So in the movie, its kind of strangeness comes from music and the way it's presented in the film, really. Whereas here, I guess partly because this is the kind of thing Kirby does, where even somebody holding a cup of coffee, it looks like it's sort of full of the energies of the cosmos. It's also a way of giving it kind of energy and so on, which is another reason why it's floating. I don't think there's a floating monolith until you see it in space anyway, but I think when it's earthbound, when it's on Earth or the moon, I think in the film and book it's basically planted in the ground, and for some reason, perhaps to do with the fact that he knows he's going to have to fit it into comics panels, the proportions are different. But yeah, that's your Kirby monolith, the star of the show. Yeah, pretty spectacular kind of line work in this drawing, showing them the apes kind of approaching it and getting their sort of evolutionary enhancing input from it. And there's the jump cut, the bone that gets thrown in the air that turns into a spacecraft. It could be done. A different artist would have probably spent more time on this and done it in different ways. And then you get some collage work. Now, Kirby used collages in all sorts of comics, particularly originally I think Fantastic Four. You saw sort of cosmic scenes depicted using collage rather than drawing, which was mind-blowing. And I think there's some of that in his DC work as well. But it's in those instances he's creating things out of his own mind. So to see sudden sort of use of photographs from the movie, it's got a bit of a different vibe really. It's like it suddenly lurches into being a photo novella with a slight hint of maybe he didn't want to draw all that detail. So yeah, wasn't so keen on these collage pages, and it's a lot wordier than the movie and a lot more dialogue as well. And on the moon, a scene which I described as being like an incredibly bland meeting presentation scene in a conference room in the movie, that's sort of so glacial and sort of effectless in the movie. In this, it looks like this is the most exciting presentation ever. These are the audience, with the projector beams going over their heads. Like I say, who's ever seen a projector beam from a device looking that exciting and such a rapt audience? And also you can see some classic Kirby geology. So as well as energy, his drawing of basically rocks and landscapes is very very distinctive and has a very kind of rugged, powerful feel. And then sometimes, I mean, yes, he can draw things out of the film with all the detail, but sometimes little bits of Kirby-esque drawing appear, so this sort of orange wavy thing that's much more of a Kirby thing than a Kubrick movie design thing. And as for space, I mean, in the movie, space is it feels very quiet and stately and kind of empty. To Kirby, and he perhaps being the William Blake of comics, perhaps this is what he saw when he looked to the skies. But planets, stars, again, bursting with energy, full of colour. There's a kind of a spectacle just in the way the universe is. Hey, who activated these mechanical arms? Another Kirby tick of writing is weird emphasis. They like emphasising words in the sentences you wouldn't expect. And we do get some very spectacular splash pages bringing out some sort of key scenes from the movie. And another Kirby thing is to divide his stories into very short chapters and give them these kind of hucksterish, boosterish headings. So we're now heading towards the Dimension Trip and the birth of a new one, in quotes. Up till now, Kirby's been adapting the film. He's been drawing things from the film, and I think he probably found that quite tedious and restrictive. In the trippy sequence at the end, he can cut loose and do his own thing, and I think on double page spreads like this, that works fantastically, and the impact of having such a vast space of illustration sort of is the equivalent of the overwhelm of that part of the film. It's a spectacular book in lots of ways. There's different schools of thought about how successful it is. Like I said, it's a completely different way of doing the, oh yeah, more of the trippiness. Don't you just want to run down the aisle and leap into the cinema screen, or in this case, I suppose, leap into the centrefold, or the gutter, I think this is called. The reactions and the transformation played out really in colour and line and shade. Yeah, great stuff. So that happened, but that wasn't all. Then they said, in fact it might even say in this coming soon monthly book, 2001 will soon be coming your way as a star-spanning series from Marvel. Watch for it. Series. So how's that going to work? A monthly comic book, regular size comic book of 2001. What would it be? The same story again, chopped up into individual episodes? The sequels? Some kind of anthology science fiction series under the 2001 banner? A more traditional comic book with superheroes? The answer to this was yes. Yes, it will. So we had 2001 A Space Odyssey appearing. And again, it's Kirby all the way. But it looks a bit more like a normal comic. You've got the corner tab, which normally you'd have, like, you know, Spider-Man or something to help show you on the racks who's in the comic, even if you couldn't see the whole cover. So here you see a primitive man and an astronaut's head in front of the monolith, which is pretty cool. And this story, Beast Killer, pretty similar to the movie story. Starts off with primitive sort of ancestors of humans. They're in survival mode, and the arrival of the monolith gives them an advantage by acting as a sort of tutorial. So telling one of these proto-humans how to use weapons. This can slay Sabretooth, the spirit does not lie. Which then jump cuts from primitive to future, with some space astronaut dudes on an asteroid. So a little bit different. Film and book, the interventions from the monolith, it happens once back in the sort of African drought time, and then it's up to humans to evolve to the point when they can travel to the moon, and that sort of triggers the second monolith knowing, hey, they're evolving, let's move on to the next stage. So here you've got a monolith reappearing at later stages. Okay, and then on this asteroid you get bug-eyed monsters, very different feel to the anything in the film. It's almost like that's the kind of science fiction they were trying to not do. And it proceeds in a similar sort of way, with an astronaut kind of falling into the monolith, having a cosmic trip, ending up in a kind of a safe but how did I get here kind of landscape, where they end up aging, dying, and turning into one of the star. They're called star seeds in this. So okay, kind of a here's the movie again, but compressed into a comic. Issue 2. Second startling issue, Vira the She-Demon. So whether this is a bit later, but again it's another primitive person, this Vira. She's got to fight off aggressors. Some spectacular drawings. Monolith comes along, gives us some tips, and the plan is take these bones and tusks and things that are lying around in primitivity, and turn them into a crazy goddess outfit, which then makes the former aggressors kind of worship her. And as the panel says, Vira has found the security that she so desperately sought, clad in bones and smeared with soil. So it's the odd emphasis business. She will rule by fear and launch humanity on the road to unity by government. Her kind will be followed by kings and congresses for ages to come. So this is what the Mother of Parliaments looks like. In a rather odd development, really, but yeah, so we get another thing. And in the future, she's not Vira, she's Vera Gentry in space, where once again there's aliens and jeopardy and stuff like that, and rescue via monolith, followed by cosmic trip and becoming a starseed. So hey, it's the same story again, which is beginning to baffle people. You know, the letters page in this is very contentious, because some people are like, what? So with all these weird aliens, it's like it's got sort of a planetary romance feel about it. Okay, then we get another one in history, this time a two-part story about Marak the Merciless, a kind of warrior type character, and big spectacular action, and this time Johnny Monolith is giving them, basically he's ending the Stone Age and giving them metallurgy. So it's the sort of the dawn of the Bronze Age, which gives them weapons so they can conquer. So all of these evolutionary things have been, you know, here's a new way to do violence. And a thing again that's different in this series is that there's a sort of a people ask it questions, or they take the monolith their problems and it gives them an answer, which isn't really the, you know, I think it's more like raising intelligence per se in the book and film, which enables the humans to figure things out, rather than how do we conquer other tribes? Well, how about metal? So different and a bit bleak, really. Yeah, so Marak has a future astronaut surrogate, and it proceeds in the same way but without the same ending. So not everyone. Many are called but few are chosen, because they don't all become star fetuses. Then number 5, Norton of New York. So now, rather than starting back in prehistory, we're already in the future. In fact, we're past 2001 when we get like the person in trouble who then gets the monolith sort of santering them up. So in this 2040, that's now only 15 years away, people are obsessed with comic book stories, so much so that some people dress up and participate in reenactments and sort of live adventures that they role play of comic book stuff. So yeah, imagine if that happened. And it brings another science fiction idea: overpopulation. I'm generally liking the art. There's things like, you know, Kirby is so economical. The character's talking about living in this huge kind of apartment block, a massive complex in which millions live. You could have several pages of him wandering corridors and things showing how this works, but you've just got him foregrounded against this kind of brutalist background. That's rather lovely. So, you know, Monolith's still at it even after the year 2001. which is strange. But the art's sort of taking off again. There's some really fabulous, weird stuff happening. Again, in this very sort of golden age SF flavour with aliens and so forth. And a classic panel, which I've read a whole essay about this, taken as a piece of art really, just about how the, figure and ground are kind of absorbing into each other. People who like this are people who like the fact that Kirby was almost leaning into abstraction. Anyway, finally we get a story where the new seed actually does something. So rather than just being a kind of baby in a bubble with some sort of future, we now know what that's going to be. So in an editorial piece, Kirby had sort of said in an original issue, didn't know what happened, wasn't interested in what happens, it's just about hope. So this sort of grim human life of struggle and conquest and violence, it's like at least that finishes and we get the new creatures. And that idea kind of continues in this really. So the little space baby whizzes around in space, observing, solving problems, creating new life, not in a monolith way, but in a different way. And the final 3 issues. By this time, it's like people weren't really buying this book or the concept. So, as a sort of get out, they used it as a springboard for a superhero. So they created a superhero. Originally he's called X-51, becomes Mr. Machine, becomes Machine Man. So it's a sentient robot, another classic science fiction idea, sentient robot who knows that he is alive but is pursued and has lots of jeopardy from people wanting to get rid of him as a threat to humanity. So there's that kind of like, what's human? That's what the Monolith's helping out with this time in a very brief appearance. It is barely even necessary. But a good character, and a character that has lasted a long time in comics. So this collection alone has all sorts of different subsequent appearances of Machine Man. So that character makes the jump into the Marvel universe. So up till now there's no hint that anything in the 2001 books are in the same universe as the sort of Marvel superheroes, but Machine Man very definitely is, and a good character. He's a kind of an innocent abroad, perhaps a sort of exceptionally good-natured and amiable character, and a good example of what Jack Kirby tends to do, which is launch things and let them go, and then other people carry them on. So those were the 2001 comics. Adaptation and bizarre sequels, which are done differently, really. The Monolith works in a different way. Pulls in loads of other science fiction ideas. Like I said, very different tone. I think you've got a classic piece of art and you've got a quirky series of comics, and you've got the origin of an ongoing character. That's what happened in comics. After this, I can read the 2010 novel by Arthur C. Clarke and watch the 2010 movie. And then after that, there's more Arthur C. Clarke books. And there's even a whole other series, a Time Odyssey as well. Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in my throat. A Time Odyssey as well. Okay, back soon with something else.